Hey everybody, thanks for joining me, Andy Sokolovich, for another episode of Thematics. This is episode number 40 already. Today's guest is none other than the one, the only, Becky Hammond from isogostrong.com. What is Isogo? Well, listen in and you'll find out. She'll explain the origins of the name and how she came up with it for her business. We'll also talk about a star stretch, and we'll really highlight the theme Achiever. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and as always, stay addicted. You're listening to Thematics, presented by UnleashStrengths.com, the only show that embraces your addiction to strengths. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the one, the only, the greatest podcast on the planet Earth. That's right, folks, Thematics. My name is Andy Sokolovich, and I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach and the owner of a coaching practice, Unleash Strengths, nestled in the Midwest town of Clinton, Iowa. I'm a coach for hire, working with organizations to enhance employee engagement, boost recognition, and increase overall job satisfaction. If you are interested in enlisting the skills of a strengths coach, or you're looking for a speaker for your next workshop, conference, seminar, consider giving me a call at 815-441-2219 or shoot me an email, Andy@UnleashStrengths.com. Thematics is a podcast series designed to highlight the massive impact the Clifton StrengthsFinder assessment has had on now over 12 million people. And today I have the GallupStrengthsCenter.com website open, and I'll give you the official numbers. It's 12,660,656. So it won't be long before we'll be able to say 13 million. It is our belief here at Unleash Strengths, the best way to promote its effectiveness and proven results is to interview those who've experienced the power of strengths-based development firsthand. Our guest today is intimately aware of her strengths and wants nothing more than to share her story in an effort to help out others just like you succeed. For more information or to schedule yourself an interview, that's right, you too can be on this show. All I ask is that you are a true thematic. Go ahead again and shoot me an email at Andy@UnleashStrengths.com. Hit us up on social media, Facebook.com/Unleash Strengths, Twitter @Unleash CSF. You can also subscribe to our RSS feed and our iTunes links. Everything is on UnleashStrengths.com. We do ask that if you listen to us on iTunes, please leave us a positive review. It really helps our podcast grow. My host, as always, is the one, the only, the lovely, the talented, the Northwest Coaster. Is that a correct statement? Northwest
Sure,
Coaster?
Pacific Northwesterner.
Yeah, there you go. Grace LeConte. Grace is the owner of LeConte Consulting. That's LACONTE consulting.com. Grace provides strengths-based training to management teams and groups. Grace, what's going on with you today?
Hi. It's raining in Vancouver, Washington, and
surprise.
I am on a really exciting journey called the 30-Day Minimalist Challenge, which is a challenge I made to myself to figure out how can I make my life that's crazy as a manager more simple and easy and not as chaotic. So I'm on this journey, and part of the challenge for these last few days has been to get off the internet and Facebook and email. So I haven't updated my blog, but I'm planning to do that in the next couple of days here, just to explain what I'm doing every day and how it's going.
Just as long as you don't take Skype off of those lists of things to do, because I need
I
you,
kind of
Grace.
need to do the rest of my responsibilities.
Yeah, you got to hang out with me.
It's been great already. I really feel so much more refreshed. I mean, I've been challenging myself to get more sleep, to be more mindful in my conversations, to have goals that I actually have that are achievable and work toward just so many ways to connect with people that I wasn't really doing before. So
achievable goals. We talked about that in the past. And as everybody knows, Andy can achieve goals that are within a 24-hour window. Anything outside of that, probably not going to happen. So enough about you and I. Let's introduce our guest today. I first saw this professional speak when she was interviewed by Gallup for Gallup's Call to Coach. And I was amazed by her passion and her drive and her energy. And I thought, man, I got to get her on this show. So I'm happy to announce that today we have Becky Hammond on the show. Becky, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us today. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and then reveal your top 5.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Grace. I'm just kind of cracking up over here already listening to you two banter back and forth. So I know that this is going to be a really fun half hour or whatever it ends up being. Like Andy said, my name's Becky Hammond. I founded a company called Isogo, and I can explain that a little bit farther down the line. And what I do is help teams mostly discover their talents and develop their teams. And my top 5 are achiever, arranger, learner, belief, and connectedness. And so as you might imagine, I do all of my work through that lens, and I have a blast doing it.
Yeah, there's no doubt that you enjoy what you do. I don't think I've ever seen you, whether it would be on Facebook or a video that you post without a smile on your face. So tell us a little bit about this Isogo. What does that mean?
This to me is, you can see my connectedness coming through when you start talking about Isogo, because I started this strengths journey, let's say it was a while. We don't have to just say, let's say, it was about 8 years ago. I attended a leadership conference. And so it was kind of by happenstance that I fell upon StrengthsFinder. We took a couple of different assessments there, StrengthsFinder, MBTI. And as I kind of unpacked what the results were for me, one, it was not surprising, as is the case with a lot of people who take this assessment. And the second was that I saw how it all of a sudden was going to have massive impact in my relationships around me, based on knowing my filter and their filter of the world. And I can go into that. But I started using it in my marriage, in my management, and then life's adventure took us over to Japan, and we got to live there. Yeah, it was amazing. We got to live there for 3 years. Our first 2 kids were born there. And this is my time where I really feel like was my opportunity to put achiever in check. We all have these volume dials on our strengths. And for me, achiever always has, and probably is again, dialed high. It's almost probably dialed too high most of the time, where I think I needed a jolt in order to really take some time to allow some of my other strengths to thrive and be developed. And so I had 3 years where I was in Japan and just exploring the country, learning the language, and just getting involved and in the opportunity that I had there. And the town that we lived in while we were there was called Isogo. As we were thinking about transitioning to come back to the United States, the idea of strengths and StrengthsFinder and spreading it just kind of kept coming over and over to my mind. And so that last year, especially that I was there, I just started trying to figure out, how can I help people experience the revelation that I've experienced through understanding how I'm wired, understanding how the people beside me are wired, and then using that to have more, basically less frustrating conversations, less frustrating relationships, and more effective and more productive relationships at work. It just happened to be right around the same time that Gallup was launching their StrengthsFinder coaching certification. And so within a couple weeks of being back in the States, I was in Washington, D.C., taking the first of the 3 series. And as I was figuring out what I wanted to name this business, the only thing that kept coming back to me was Isogo. Isogo is a place where this idea was born. And so that's how I came upon that.
Wow, that's really interesting. I'm just thinking, Becky, of a CEO that I just spoke with a few days ago at a long-term care facility, whose job it is to run the facility, make sure that it's profitable, and margins in long-term care are getting smaller and smaller, for elderly patients, transitional care from a hospital before they go back home, or residential communities. And this gentleman was telling me, he got in touch with me to tell me his story. And as we talked about it, I mentioned strengths. And he was fascinated. He'd never heard of StrengthsFinder before. He'd taken all sorts of other personality tests and had been assigned to go to seminars and training with his company, but he had never heard of it. And as the conversation went on, he mentioned that he has an administrative role and responsibilities, but he cares so deeply for people and their feelings and the emotion that goes into, someone that comes into his facility has problems. They're sick, they have physical ailments, and many times they become, they can go through dementia or other types of degenerative problems. And he cares so much about their experience and their family's experience. And that made such a big difference for how people experienced his facility. So I mentioned, it's probably true that you have relationship building strengths very high. And I would think that's kind of unusual for CEOs. Because, and he said, yes, you're right. In my circles, I'm one of the only people that has this, this kind of weakness. It's perceived as a weakness to be very feeling oriented when you're that high up. I just think it's fascinating that we all have this amazing distribution of how we see things. And it may be the reason why people get frustrated in their jobs. Don't you think, Becky?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of times as I've been coaching people, especially people who are in kind of leadership or managerial roles, there's a certain set of strengths that rub them the wrong way, especially when they pop up on their own assessment. A gentleman who is, a killer sales rep manager has empathy very high. And it took a long time for us to go back and forth for him to really understand how it is a strength. It's not a feminine characteristic.
Right.
It's
so
not,
true.
Yeah, it's not a quality that he should shy away from or try to stuff down, but rather use to his advantage. And I think, he was able to kind of start to come over to that side and be able to see that, there might be a cultural bias against this, but if I use it to increase productivity of my team or to motivate or engage them, it's only doing what it's supposed to do. It's only a strength and not a weakness.
So, Becky, one of the things that you said when you initially started introducing us to who you are and where your business came from, you talked a lot about achiever, and some of the things I wrote down were too high and needed to be put in check. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because we like to, every once in a while on the show, more recently, we'd like to identify certain themes and talk about those balconies and basements.
Achiever, I've taken the assessment twice now, 8 years apart. Achiever came up as number one both times, and it's not a surprise to me or to anyone around me. I would say kind of the dialed too high aspect of it is when it starts to get in the way of people. I do not have high number of relationship themes, even in my top 10 in my dominant themes. Connectedness is in my top 5, but my opinion is that it's not a very strong relational strength, like some of the others are. And so oftentimes my to-do list can get in the way of turning around and looking at someone. These days, my achiever can keep me up till 2 a.m. I like to say that 2 a.m. and I are way too familiar with each other.
Oh my gosh, we got to give a high five to that one. Andy and I both stay up till ridiculous hours in the morning. That's more ideation coming out. For you, it's the list, right?
It's
get the list done.
Yeah, because I can be dead tired at 9 o'clock, but once the kids are all in bed and everything's quiet and the kitchen is cleaned, my brain turns on and says, oh my, I could do this and this and this. And when I start getting things done, when I start checking things off the list, I have energy like 12-fold from the energy I had at 8:30 in the evening.
Oh my
so
word.
it's that, it's that sign of strength. It's that energy thing. But how do I use it productively so that then when my kids wake me up at 6 the next morning, no matter what time I went to bed, I'm not a disaster, or I don't have, a lack of patience for, my work or my life, or, I'm in the middle of my workday at regular hours and I can't seem to stay awake. So I think that's where I mean that it's kind of an overdrive. It's too high. And it's affecting negatively the way that the rest of my life lives out, just because I'm overusing that strength.
Becky, where do discipline and responsibility fall for you?
Top 10.
Really? Oh, wow. So so you'll just drag yourself out of bed and make it work, right? Even if you've had a super late night, you're just going to plow on through the next day. Man, that's great.
Well, your work ethic definitely shows in some of the content you've been able to create. So I'm over at isogostrong.com. That's ISOGO strong.com. And tell us a little bit about your new thing that you got going on here, Isogo TV Live and Work Your Strengths.
Yes. And actually, it's funny that you say it just like that, because my mother-in-law, when we were telling her how to look it up on iTunes, she said, Isogo TV Live and Work Your Strengths. And in our heads, the entire time that we had been thinking of through this title, it's Isogo TV, Live and Work Your Strengths video podcast.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's like one of those things that you're just like, oops, I mean, there's nothing that you can really do about it in the end. And so I've been, started to put like weird hyphens and things like that in place to see if we can change that.
Yeah,
but
maybe a colon after the TV, because that's where when I see TV and live or live, I automatically think live.
Yeah, but TV is live necessarily a bad thing that it's perceived as being live? It sounds like it's alive, or it's more energetic.
Well, I wanted to know how you were doing it live. That's what I was thinking. Like, how is she doing this?
He's like, well, I don't know how you're doing that live. Well, the thing is, I'm not. So that's how. And so, but it is this is the most exciting thing that I am doing. And I say I, but it's we. So my husband and I, who originally had this strengths revelation together. I shared over at the Gallup Call to Coach that really my strengths journey started in our kitchen. The relationship between my husband and I, where we realized that my achiever and his relator were missing on so many levels, where we were not seeing each other's idiosyncrasies as strengths, rather things that somehow we were doing intentionally to frustrate each other, which just wasn't true. We just weren't understanding the filters through which we were seeing the world. And so it has dramatically impacted his life and the way that he manages the people that he works with. This last year, I lean on him for his futuristic and some of his able to see what could be. And he said, you know what? I think we should do this Isogo TV thing. I think we should do a video podcast and help people understand how to use their strengths, and this is Andy and Grace, this is something that you guys are doing here at Thematics is, once some people have taken the assessment, what's next? How do they actually see it in action? How do they take the next step and really use this? It's like, oh yeah, I see that how that describes me, but I don't understand how I can make this tangible and usable and really impact my life. And so Isogo TV came about from the conversations that we would have on our deck late into the night. And he's the video guy. So you'll see him in the videos, and he's the post processor and everything. I think you're right to call out responsibility and discipline. I think we've committed to doing this for at least a year weekly. And now that things are starting to post, we're realizing, that it's a big commitment, in some ways a sacrifice to some of the other things that we have going on in our lives, but we couldn't be more excited about it. I love that it's getting to reach people to help them understand how do they actually use this. So I really try to make it practical, tangible, 10 minutes or under for the most part, so that people can just to have another resource or a resource. I don't know if there's that many out there, to really help people understand how to take that next step in using their strengths on a daily basis in their everyday work and their everyday life. Yeah,
we've had several discussions with our guests on here of the, Gallup's name, claim, aim. Sure. And the naming and claiming part is easy. Okay, I'm not going to say easy. It's one of those things where it's going to come a little quicker. The aim portion of it is the part that really gets people caught up. And 9 times out of 10, I think when people bail on the concept of strengths-based development, it's because that aim has just proven to be maybe too difficult, or they haven't had that sense of direction. And I know your videos are doing that for individuals, and this podcast as well. There's starting to be some more and more content and resources being developed that are going to speak to individuals on how you can actually apply this stuff and not just look at it as gee whiz information. You took an assessment, now you have this printout. I applaud you for what you're doing, and kudos to your hubby there too. What's his top 5?
His top 5 are relator and activator, self-assurance, futuristic, and context.
Yeah, I have
futuristic and context.
Yes, it's an interesting combo.
Very unusual to have future and past at the same time, right?
Yep. Wow. I mean, it's a beautiful how it works. Like someone, actually, the very first time we ever took the assessment, we were kind of being spun up by people who didn't really know that much about the assessment, but they said, I don't know. How would that even work? And he's like, it works. Yeah. He's like, it makes perfect sense. Like he's a total history buff. Yeah. He loves, he was like that 6th grader who was reading about the Civil War. And yet he can paint and cast a vision to the future, but he uses his knowledge of the context of the past to do that. So, it's a funky combination that really makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, context for me sits out at number 32, so super low. But I do often, even when my futuristic kicks in, I think of what could be. There's times where I do pause and say, okay, but has it been done before, and what mistakes were made back then? But it doesn't happen often, so that makes sense why it's number 32.
You have to actually think that, right?
Yeah, I have to force that thought, yeah. So
the context is my 34.
Oh,
my last.
Well, that's interesting.
It's my husband's, I forget what his order is, but it's one of his top 5. So we see things very differently. But that's really neat. Becky, I very much agree with you that it can help so much in relating to your spouse or partner, or even to close family members. I mean, I'm now finally convinced all of my immediate family members to take this assessment. Finally. And the couple the 2 people that didn't want to ended up having deliberative in their top 5. So that was
interesting.
It was like, I knew it. I knew that was going to happen. But it really helps to create conversation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That was one of the things that I have been thinking through recently. So this last week, I had the opportunity to get together with some extended family members. And it's just, when it's a part of everything that I do and everything that I think and everything that I breathe, it just kind of comes out. Right. And I was thinking after this last week, I was like, pretty soon we're going to need to have some like family reunion workshop experience where we can all get together. There'll be, 20 people, extended family. We've all kind of grown up together, but really to see exactly how we're wired and the lens through which we're seeing the world and how we've gotten to the success that we've gotten to. I mean, that would just be a really fun, really insightful, killer workshop experience.
I'm thinking about bringing my family together for that, and I don't know if I want to be a part of that.
We want to come too.
yeah, exactly.
We'll use yours as a case study before I go digging into that well. That may be a little too deep for me.
That would get really deep. Question for you though, Becky. You mentioned, I guess we're going to be focusing on achiever today, right, Andy? I hope that's okay.
Not in particular, but I just thought that, as Becky was speaking in the beginning, achiever seemed to pop up a few times, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our audience has given us some feedback, and one thing that they specifically requested, a few people wanted, was a focus on one particular theme. So we haven't really planned it that way, but since we talked about achiever, I would love to know, Becky, how your family relates to the achiever strength in you. Do they feel like overwhelmed by your list of things to do? Do they feel that you push them a bit too much to achieve themselves if they aren't as interested in doing it? Has that ever been a problem?
There's absolutely has been a problem. I think there's as you're talking or asking the question, my mind goes a couple different directions. One is just my nuclear family here. I think now that we have the language of strengths and we've been able to kind of work through that initial aha moment of between the relator and the achiever, that conflict that was happening, we are able to use our terms really easily to kind of diffuse situations. And so, my husband affectionately calls me the pusher of our family. So,
and he's the activator, right?
Yes. Well, yes.
He's not pushing.
He's not pushing. He's just kind of the one that all of a sudden has all the suitcases unloaded in 4 seconds after we, walked in the door from a trip. It comes across as the person who helps the family follow through and get things done. And it can be as simple as getting out the door, making sure that we, have marked all the boxes in order to get out the door with all the things that we need. But I definitely think that, just as I was mentioning, it still gets in my way. It's still people around me, the people who are closest to me, my family, they still see, and now especially my husband is able to call me out for that. To say, okay, I understand. Let's get this on your to-do list. Like, talk to me, put that on your to-do list. Like, okay.
Spend time with your husband.
Yeah, exactly. Look at him in the eyes. Oh, okay. And the other side that I was thinking though, was in my, my growing up nuclear family. So my dad and my sisters, they've all taken the assessment. My sister is a professional organizer. Actually, she's in Northwest Iowa there in Orange City, Iowa. And she took the strengths assessment kind of when I was just getting all spun up on all this, and has been able to see how the way she's wired really matches with the profession that she chose. But she also has achiever in her top 5. And my other sister does not. And we were able to see how the stamina that Iowa sister and I have has played out and come up throughout throughout our lives. And my other sister, she's an incredibly hard worker, but she just likes to go to bed. It's like, she's like, you know what? She understands that she's going to be better the next day if she goes to bed. And so probably would be true of us as well, but she doesn't get that same energy, from that like buzz of getting things done. And so I think it was really eye-opening, and at least, if not totally revolutionary, at least helped us to be able to understand that strange dynamic that went in between us. And that's that my sister who didn't have achiever doesn't have to feel bad about that. Doesn't have to feel like, oh man, I'm not keeping up. It has nothing to do with that. When she decides to go to bed, it's because she's going to be stronger in the morning based on the way she's wired.
I have a daughter, one of my 3 kids. My oldest has achiever, and she self-recognized the strength 2 years ago when she was 6 years old. Because I read through some of the descriptions and kind of a kid-friendly version that I just kind of explained, so achiever is the one where you have a mental list of things to do and you check it off your list. She's like, Mommy, doesn't everybody have that? And I'm like, no.
What an insight.
But I think the coolest thing about kids who are able to understand these from childhood is that they are completely okay with themselves to a certain point until they hit those years when things start to fall apart. People question them or make fun of them, or they want to be part of the group. All 3 of my kids are completely confident that their strengths are exactly what they should be, and that they take total ownership of it. It's just amazing. And I am not the perfect parent by any stretch of the imagination. I have made so many mistakes. I've been in my head too much and have neglected them at certain points because of my strengths that I go to the basement of, the bottom, the worst areas. But I think the cool thing is my son is extremely proud that he's intellectual and that he's deliberative. He's very cautious, and he says no a lot. And he wants to grow up to be a building inspector. Wow. And say, this is wrong. It needs to be torn down and blown up. Like, he loves that power that he could have. My daughter with achiever is so happy that she has lists and she can check things off and achieve them. So Becky, I hope that you can have some pride in the fact that strength is fantastic. You mentioned that you feel like it's a little bit too much, or that you need to put it in check, but it's still an amazing strength. So I hope that you recognize that in yourself. Go, yeah, Becky, sure. Go.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of the keys to my success for sure.
Yeah. I mean, people, if we didn't have any achievers in this world, very little would actually get done.
Yeah.
We would lose track. And
good thing 28% of us do.
I know. It's the most common strength. Right?
Speaking of parental strength comparisons, my daughter's birthday is today. She is 6 years old, and we're having a party for her tomorrow. Now, I sit here in Clinton, Iowa, and now I have my mother who came to visit from Reading, Pennsylvania, and my wife. And my wife does not like party planning. She doesn't, she gets nervous when people ask her to be, in their wedding, or they ask her to throw them a bridal shower. She's like, I don't like that stuff. And she doesn't. And it's not, part of her strengths makeup. My mom, polar opposite. My mom should be a professional party planner. She absolutely loves making sure that all the colors look perfect and that everything's matched and there's a theme. And it's amazing seeing those two work with each other right now, because if this was up to my wife, everybody would be getting probably goodies in a Ziploc bag. And now that my mom's here, she's kind of taken the helm and she's driving this party to something that we never thought it could be. So it's amazing what happens when those two team up. My wife actually is just kind of taking a back seat. So I don't want to use the word team up, and my mom's the driving force right now, but it's kind of cool to look at those two and see how completely different they are. So Becky, we always like to ask, and now I know you use the assessment professionally and that it made a huge impact on your life, but Sure. Tell us a little bit about that conversation you have with others when you introduce them to the Clifton StrengthsFinder assessment. One of my favorite
groups, I would say, or favorite set of people to talk to the StrengthsFinder about is an intact team that's maybe 10 to 20 people. I love to start the conversation by drawing notice to the fact that we all have this kind of underlying expectation that we be well-rounded. We talk about it, and this is where my emphasis on the star comes in, because, I talk about how the ethos of our society even is so strong that we we think that if we are that Renaissance man or that Renaissance woman, we are going to be the most successful. And so when I'm talking with these groups, I say it's not about that circle. We are not going to be most successful when we're the circle, but rather, these now decades of research has showing us that the most successful people get to their place of success by concentrating on their strengths, by looking less like a circle and more like a star. And so where each point is one of their, let's say, 5 strengths, at least from the StrengthsFinder perspective, and that the brighter, the sharper their star is, the more successful they are going to be. And so I love to start there because 1, it gives people a visual, and 2, it just kind of calls out that underlying false understanding that we have about how we're going to be most successful. That the emphasis should be on becoming more of who you already are and not trying to be like somebody else or somebody that you're not.
Tell us about your star stretch. This has become very popular.
Yeah. So one thing I realized, so I am achiever learner, right? I don't care if something is boring. I just don't get bored. I sit there and I take in the information. I take notes. I mean, maybe that's the discipline coming in as well. But as I was kind of starting in on my workshops a couple of years ago, I started to realize that my filter of not being bored really was coming through. I really wanted people to reflect and think and write. But what I found was that the energy just wasn't as awesome as it could have been. People weren't as engaged as a result as they could have been, let's say 3/4 of the way through a 4-hour session. And so what I realized is that I needed to work kind of activities. I mean, I was doing activities, but just a different level of activity and mobility into my workshops. And so I kind of took that and said, okay, how do I, instead of just saying, okay, let's take a break to stretch, how do I help people continue to solidify the concept and as a side note, get up and stretch. And so one day as I was preparing one of my workshops, I said, I wonder if I could make people think that they were shaped like a star. So when I feel like the energy maybe needs a little bit of a pickup, or maybe after some sort of kind of internal reflection activity, I'll have people stand up, have them stretch out their arms and their legs, or their arms up into the air and their legs out.
Should we do that right now, Becky?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay.
Go ahead and do it. You'll feel good about it.
Stretching out.
And as they're doing it, I say, okay, now stretch as far as you can. And they do. And then as they still have their arms out there, I say, this is your star. And, I always get a few chuckles like, oh, haha, and where your feet and your hands and your head are your strengths. And then I say, okay, stretch out as far as you can. And they do. And I say, now give me another inch. And inevitably, you see the entire room stretch just a little bit more. And at that point, I say, that's what we're going for today. That extra inch in your strength. If you can even take one of your strengths, let's say the strengths from your hand that's up in the air, that point, and figure out how to make that even a little bit sharper, that's the extra inch that you're going for today that you can take away and use in your everyday work or your everyday life. Mm-hmm. And so after that, they're all kind of are stretched out. They hopefully now have had a physical manifestation of what I'm talking about when we're going for the star and what the takeaway is supposed to be from the day. I mean, that's one of my factors of success is, did they understand what the value was that they should have pulled from the workshop, or that they did pull from the workshop experience. And so, it kind of hits on all sorts of levels, and they sit back down and they've all stretched out and the energy's higher and we move on.
I like that.
Wow. I just did that exercise. Yeah. I stretched out, and then there was always a little bit more that you can stretch.
There always is.
That's
really
and
I got that, the extra inch from a good friend of mine. I was watching him, Rourke Denver. He's a totally different, he's a speaker, a totally different path, but, he really manages the room well. And I saw him do something kind of similar in terms of, having people put their hands up in the air. Had nothing to do with a star, but, kind of giving that extra inch they always can. And it gets people's vertebrae stretched out that one more little bit, and they sit back down and they're much more into what you're talking about.
Yeah. It reminds me of when I was in the military, we'd have to do water confidence training, and I was part of this small group of folks that was going through this program, and
that sounds frightening.
Well, we'd have to do underwaters, so like you have to go from point A to point B underwater, and it was all about managing your inhale, managing your exhale, managing the amount of oxygen you use, going nice and slow and smooth. And you always get to that point where we call it kind of seeing the wizard. It's when you got really close to passing out, but you weren't there yet. And you could give yourself, and this is completely different. Nobody tried this at home, but this is, and then you just think to yourself, if I get one more good stroke in, I can travel an extra 10 yards. And you would constantly do that over and over and over again. And over a series of X number of months of doing this, we were knocking out 50-yard underwaters easily. And it was just building ourselves up to that point. And when you first jumped in the pool, several of us couldn't even complete 25 yards or meters underwater. So it reminds me of that. You're bringing me back memories that not all of those memories were good.
Are they good? I don't know.
It was a time in my life where I was a little bit I was in some better shape, and I was less cautious about things. But
there you go.
But I learned something from it for sure. So Becky, what is your favorite theme? And I use the word favorite, and I probably should modify this. But what theme in your top 5 do you really believe is the kind of driving force in everything you do? And I think we may have touched on it already, but let's go ahead and highlight it one more time before we close this out.
Yeah. And I think you're right that when I first took this assessment 8 years ago, I hands down would have said achiever. But I feel like that has changed over time as I have connected more deeply with my strengths. I think for me now, when I was reflecting on this, connectedness is what really feels foundational for me. It's kind of that, if you think of our strengths as an iceberg, the things on the top, my achiever and my arrangers in particular, are things that people always see of me. They know of me. It's what I'm known for. But it was that belief and connectedness that were kind of under the surface on that iceberg that were the foundation all along. We're driving the why behind that achiever and that arranger. And I've been asked in my life to explain that. And I didn't know that it was because I wasn't allowing that kind of connectedness to come through. And I think, to your point, Grace, about your daughter, doesn't everyone do that? It's like, well, I just kind of thought, well, doesn't everyone see the connections between things? Doesn't everyone just kind of instantly in a moment be able to see like the past, the present, and the future implications of that particular transaction? And the answer, of course, is no. And I realized that I had that to be able to share. And I think I love that describes my why, that it gives me something to share with other people when they are going through a hard time, or when they can't really figure out how their role as a manager fits into the organization as a whole. I'm able to help them kind of draw that out. And so kind of from a personal and professional standpoint, I would say right now, that's my favorite theme.
That's great. Would you mind briefly sharing what your why is and what that even means? Can you define that for us?
Sure. It's like, how do the things on my to-do list get on my to-do list? Mm-hmm. It's about the priorities. So for me, like, belief has a lot to do with this innate value of people, and connectedness has to do with the understanding that everything that I do is related to or impacts something else. And so I think it is part of what balances my achiever. What can balance it, if I allow it to, is to say, okay, how do I put things on my list that are going to align with that belief, or that are going to not conflict with the fact that what I'm doing impacts somebody else?
That's great.
So in closing, Becky, we started this a few episodes ago. I always like to ask our interviewees and our guests for 3 strengths-based rules for success.
Yes. Well, I think I've been thinking about this one. I think one of the things that, and maybe this is where was challenging for me to think through, is, I guess one of my rules would be practice what we preach. To say, if we're going to live out of a place of strength, then one of the things I love about that is that it's not prescriptive. Mm-hmm. It's not like follow these 7 leadership steps and you're going to be the best leader, or what, all these different blog posts and all these things that are out there are about the way those people got to success. And I mean, I do it as well as I'm blogging. Like, this is how I built a community. This is how, these were the 3 things that I messed up when I first started, those types of things, but rather that it flexes to our strengths. And so I would say the first rule would be authenticity. It's about vulnerability, about putting yourself out there to say, these are the things I'm good at. Because sometimes people can't even say that. Like, these are the things I'm good at. Yeah. And then also, these are the things I'm not good at, right? So that's kind of that authenticity piece. So that's the deeper, that's probably my belief in my connectedness. If you see that coming through of like, okay, we have to have an authenticity here in order for strengths to be successful at all. There has to be, it's not just self-awareness, but a willingness to kind of go there on our strengths and the things that aren't strengths for us. And then, secondly is much more tangible. I would say, you got to look at your strengths. You got to have them in front of you. I can't tell you how many times I've had people who are so excited about their results and they are all on board. And then 2 weeks later I say, oh yeah, what are your top 5? And they're like, well, there was that one about, that thing where you make the lists and like, okay. And they can usually get out maybe 3 or so, but the only way that we're going to use them is if we remember to remember them. And so I talk about like, what is your remember to remember tool? And oftentimes it's just a note card with them written on it that's on your bathroom mirror or on your desk or in your car or whatever that is. I have a client that keeps it in his wallet. And every time he goes in to reach for something, he sees them there and he can be reminded, oh yeah, okay, these are my strengths. These are the things I need to make my strengths be activated. And so those are the only 2 that I came up with, authenticity and remembering to remember your strengths. I think those are my 2 strength-based rules.
You've arranged it down to 2, right, Becky?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the efficiency aspect right there.
Yeah. No, those are,
I love
those
the
are
list thing. Go ahead, Andy.
Authenticity is huge. And that's something that I kind of really value is be who you are and don't try to emulate others to the extreme where you all of a sudden now want to become them, or you're trying to copy them verbatim. And you see it all the time on social media. We see it in our day-to-day lives. You see it in the workplace. I mean, I've been interviewed or have coached so many people who just say, I try every day to be like so-and-so because so-and-so is the favorite. And I'm thinking, no, and then when you said about looking at them, yeah, there's a few, like I have a big coaching thing coming up where I'm creating everybody little lanyards. And, we've done coffee cups in the past with top 5 printed on them. And there's a little bit of overhead there. But at the end of the day, as a coach and as a business owner, I want to make sure that my message and the message of strengths is, definite. It hangs around the office place. It's visual. People can see it. So I appreciate those 2 rules for success.
Yeah, thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's funny, Becky. I think most of us who have coached strengths, even if we're not, I'm not certified as a Gallup coach, but I use the knowledge that I've learned and I apply it through my consulting with business owners and managers. And I forget my strengths sometimes. Not only, I forget not just the 5, because sometimes you just get so caught up on work and responsibilities. It isn't always front in my mind all the time, even though I'm around it all the time. I use it in my coaching and my consulting, but it's so easy to forget your own sometimes. And I think it's a great practice, even for coaches or people who are very familiar with this, to continue to recognize it in ourselves and to be more forgiving of, we don't have to be the perfect at everything. I love the 5-star analogy. We just need to keep working on the 5 and not all the rest of the 29 that are not so high on the list. As long as we can keep pushing further on the ones that are at the top, there will be more success. Would you agree with that, Becky?
That extra inch, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, reach the inch.
All right, Becky, how can we reach you? We talked about Isogo, we talked about your business. Give us a few ways that we can contact you for our listeners and those that want to connect with you more after the show's over.
I would love that. We can connect with me over at isogostrong.com. I have my blog up there. That's where you're going to find Isogo TV. And Isogo Strong is also the handle for Facebook and Twitter. So I'm up and active at those sites as well and would love to see you and talk to you and engage with you there.
All right. Thank you so much, Becky Hammond, for being on the show. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Andy and Grace. Great hosts as always.
Thank you. We had a great time talking to you, and I can't wait to watch more of your videos because I've heard a little birdie told me that they're really, really exciting.
Tweet.
Looking at it.
Well, thank you so much. It's really exciting, and I hope it impacts people and helps people to use and apply their strengths in their everyday work and their everyday life.
Yeah. And in closing, I'm going to jump on my soapbox and say, if you are a strength coach, if you are using StrengthsFinder for professional purposes to help others grow and enjoy their life and live a fulfilled existence, please create content that can be shared, because the World Wide Web is an amazing resource and there's no more excuses why you can't get your voice heard. So that's it. I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Short step down. This is, again, Andy Sokolovic, Gallup certified strengths coach. You can hit me up at Unleash Strengths. You can email me, Andy@unleashstrengths.com. And you can subscribe to this podcast. That's right, Thematics at iTunes. You can go to unleashstrengths.com/iTunes. Hit that subscribe button. Give it a listen. If you like what you hear, please leave us a positive review. Grace, thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you guys soon. See ya. Thank you for listening to another episode of Thematics presented by UnleashStrengths.com. Remember to embrace your strengths and always stay addicted. Just because this episode is over doesn't mean you have to stop watching. Click here for more episodes of the amazing podcast, Thematics. And as always, stay addicted.